Continuity Conversations on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by 337. Find out more by going to 337.ca. Well, we heard from him a couple weeks ago. We're going to talk to Derryn SShrosbree, who is the CEO and founder of 337, doing a lot of work in the area of farm transition space. And they focus a lot on continuity planning, as Derryn talked about. And we had so much great feedback on Derryn's appearance here on Real Ag Radio, and people really intrigued by some of the stuff that he does and his attitude and just the angle which he approaches farm transition planning. Is what we're doing is we're setting up a new series, and this is looking at continuity planning and looking at the 7 steps of it. Let's talk about succession planning, farm transition, however you want to phrase that. We're joined right now by the CEO and founder of 337. It is Derryn SShrosbree. Derryn, how are we doing?
Very good, thanks, Sean. How are you?
Pretty good. Okay, we're going to series here on Real Ag Radio, kind of working through your 3 stages or steps or this process of continuity planning. I guess off the top, though, why do you see farm transition as still such a big challenge? We've got a lot of education out there, a lot of people working in this space. Yet we hear more about the challenges than some of the successes.
Yeah, it's a good question, Sean. So, 88% of farmers do not have a continuity plan. So that's quite a large failure right there. So only 12% of farmers do. So why is that? I think there's 2 very simple components, and that's low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit is, what are the obstacles to continuity planning? Well, one, it could be daunting. Where do you start? People don't know where to start. So there's no real clear roadmap. We believe that there's 2 things which make it very difficult for the 88% to engage. One is the billable hour, and 2 is invoice fatigue. Everyone knows that continuity planning is important because, why are you farming? Why are you doing this? Well, you're doing it, A, to make a living, but B, more importantly, you're doing this for your family. You're doing this for the next generation. You're a steward of time. Your time on the farm is finite. When you can no longer run that farm, you pass your knowledge, your experience, and the farm to the next generation. So I'm a farmer myself. I have 3 children, 1 on farm, 2 off farm. And that's what I'm trying to set up. So when I went through my continuity plan, I found it extremely difficult because I didn't have clarity. I didn't have control. And I spoke to lawyers, and I spoke to accountants, and I spoke to insurance guys, then I spoke to the finance guys, and every single person had a different opinion, a different story, and then the invoices started coming at me, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I'm teaching them about my family, my farm, and I have to pay them to listen, which I find interesting, but yes, they have to support their families and all, but it didn't help me. And I had no clarity, no control, and a pile of invoices. So I think the 88% of farmers, they try, but they give up, right? So it's not on the farmer that hasn't given it a shot. It's on the professional services teams that are not listening and not putting out a roadmap that makes sense in farmer speak. Like, I speak farmer because I am a farmer, right? So we try to make things really, really simple and just educate. We're just here to educate on the 7 major steps that farmers sort of go through to get their continuity planning off the ground.
Well, we had you before on Real Ag Radio here, and we talked about those 7 steps. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through these 7 steps in a lot more detail, because I think there's some really critical things that, questions that people have to answer for themselves, like before you can get to that next stage in the process. And we need to be process oriented, not just outcome focused. The successful succession plan or transition plan, you increase the probability of it happening if you follow kind of a 7-step process like this. So
yeah, it definitely, you hit the nail on the head. It is 100% process driven. Just like farming, you don't just throw a seed in the ground. There's months of prep. You've got to get your inputs right. You've got to get the correct seed, the correct fertilizer. You've got to get the agronomist to take a looky-loo at the soil, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's a lot of prep around it, and it's all process-based. So yes, we have to start at the beginning and then build the plan according to a process that is, like paint by numbers, like just 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth until you get to the end. The nice thing about going through a process, Sean, is that you get the clarity and control from step 1 to step 2. You're like, okay, I've made progress. I get it. Then you get that little bit of confidence. And then you go step 2 to 3. I get it. I understand why I'm doing this, and I can build on my past decisions, right? Pretty much like farming and experience. The first time you farmed, first year, probably weren't that good at it. I sucked at it, right? But after 17 years, I can kind of grow vegetables, right? You know, so you need to build on that experience slowly over time, right?
Yeah, well put. Okay, so step number one, the big question you got to ask yourself, and I know this is diving in right off the hop because if a lot of farmers don't like to talk about money, what is
Yeah.
my farm worth? Why is that an important question?
Yeah, so it's what is the farm worth and what is the enterprise worth? So as you know, a lot of farmers have, got quota, you've got acreage, then you've got rented acreage, then you've got actively farmed acreage. Some people have an ice cream shop, some people have agritourism, some people build roof trusses, have grain haulage, et cetera, et cetera. So the enterprise is worth a certain amount. Easy math. Let's just say the enterprise is worth 10 million bucks, right? So we need to know the value of the enterprise first that's the starting point. It's like, what are we working with? What we got? So whether you're worth 10 million or 100 million, whatever the case may be, we need that number. How do we get to that number? Well, the number is you can either send all your financial instruments, which is your corporation documents, you file taxes, NOA, T1s, yada, 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 yada. You send that over, and then we put that into our calculator and we come up with a number. There's your number. It's enterprise value, right? So let's say in this example, it's 10 million bucks. That's good. Now we know what we're working with. The second thing is now we have to dissect the number into two pieces. This is very important. What is exempt from tax and what is taxable, right? So the tax exempt part is quota. You can pass it down with no tax. Actively owned and worked farmland, acreage, you can pass that down. But then it gets even more nuanced. Is that acreage personally owned or is it owned in a corporation? Right? And there's tax nuances on that. But let's not go too deep into that right now. We'll unpack that later. So let's just say your enterprise value is 10 million bucks, right? Let's say $5 million of that is tax exempt, so quota acreage and on-farm stuff, right? Combines and bits and bobs, right? And 5 million is taxable. Let's say you own a non-related business on the farm. Let's just use an ice cream shop, a creamery. Let's say you have a creamery, but you're not a dairy farm. Let's say you do broadleaf agriculture, but you have a creamery. That makes ice cream. That's taxable. That's taxable at your highest level. So if the dairy creamery is worth not dairy, sorry, if the creamery is worth 5 million bucks, that's going to be taxed at minimum 25%. So that's about $1.25 million of tax. So what we've done is we've realized, okay, enterprise value, split, exempt, non-exempt. Now we're starting to get a little deeper into the weeds of what you got, how much is it worth, and where is the legacy and where is the liability, right? So we can point to these two numbers. The legacy is quota acreage that goes down to your on-farm children. The liability is now we have to start answering questions. Let's just say easy math in this example, 10 goes to 5, and then the tax on that is $1 million bucks, easy math. That $1 million is a liability. Now you got to say, okay, does the farm have $1 million in their checking account to pay the bill if you die tomorrow? Most farmers don't have $1 million bucks sitting in a checking account for tax purposes.
Yeah.
I know I don't.
Yeah.
If I had $1 million bucks, I would definitely go and buy more glass and put up more raised beds. So anyway, so that liability, we now need so we've granulated it, we've quantified it, and we've pointed to where it resides, right? So we know where the legacy is, we know where the liability is, we know how much it is and where it resides. Let's say it's on generation one dad farmer, just to be stereotypical, but let's pop
Yeah.
that in there. That's $1 million bucks. If dad dies today, the farm needs to pay $1 million tax bill. Let's pause there. This is very dangerous and very, very tricky because with 88% of farmers not having a plan, with according to FCC, $600 billion of net worth will transfer from high generation to the next generation, which is kind of like yours and my generation, sort of the 50-year-olds, right? 600 billion will transfer within the next 8 to 10 years. So 88% of 600 billion is a big number. That's a lot of people that don't have a plan. So coming back to that $1 million bucks, if you don't have a plan to pay that, Yellowstone put it in the best words. The West was won by horses and cattle and will be lost by death and taxes. That's a great quote from Yellowstone, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Because,
Do we
yeah,
need
sorry,
to
Karen.
do we need to have that valuation done by a professional evaluator, or is this something we can ballpark? What's your thoughts there?
Very good question. Yes, absolutely. So there's two ways we can do this. You can go to a professional evaluator, like we can do it professionally for you from a certified professional business evaluator that has a stamp, and he'll get you to the penny, right? So that's a process, pretty simple, pretty quick, and we absorb the cost on that. It doesn't cost you a dime. You would do that for two purposes. One, if you want to go get financing. Two, if you want to get really, really intentional on your continuity planning. So that costs it can cost between five to $10,000 to get that done. But once again, there's no invoice fatigue and no billable hour because we absorb that and we can get you that exact number. That's option one. Option two, we can do internal calculations, which is pretty simple and pretty quick, costs nothing, and get you about 90% of the way there. So you can either get a pure business valuation for borrowing money, buying insurance, exactly what you need, or we can ballpark it. So you can choose either or. No skin, no skin of I've got skin in the game all the way through, but no skin of my nose. If you want to on the penny, we can do that. If you want a 90%, we can do that as well. It's up to you.
Yeah. Is there anything else in what your farm is worth, Darren, in this category that we need to make sure we hit on?
So now we want to talk about, the mathematics. What we do is very easy because math is easy. There's either right or wrong. The soft stuff is hard. So generally what we're doing now is as farm values have increased and land values have increased, a lot of people that were not interested in farming and didn't care about farming, they live in the city or whatever the case may be, all of a sudden look up and go, oh, hang on a sec. Dad's farm is worth $100 million. There's one on-farm child and two off-farm children. All of a sudden, the valuation of the farm becomes intriguing to off-farm children for not perhaps the right reason.
Hmm.
So there is that component to look at, which is the soft component on the front end. So as values increase, so there's more focus on those values. So if you do need to have those conversations, those are hard. Those are hard conversations because they're emotional, right? And they're with your kids. But if you want your children to have supper together, and I keep coming back to this because on December the 25th, you want your family to have supper together. You need to have open and honest communication fast. That is very important, especially around the value of the farm. Because what happens is the off-farm children don't value the amount of work it's gone into to create that farm, right? The on-farm child does because he hasn't been paid for 8 years. He drives a 20-year-old truck and has the same Carhartt dungarees. So there's this disconnect between on-farm versus off-farm children. And with a valuation of the business, let's say it's a $100 million farm, which a lot of farms are, you cannot split the farm up into, let's say there's three kids. $66 million doesn't go off farm. It's impossible, right? You can't cut the farm up. Equal is not fair. Fair is not equal. So the valuation of the business is twofold, Sean. It is emotional with family, and then it's mathematical. Math is easy. We do it all day long. We do one transition a month. I can math all day. The the soft skills on the front end, if you're stuck and you need help, there are really good people out there. Elaine Frazee is one of them. She's amazing at getting you unstuck from a family perspective. So I just think that this whole conversation needs to be very carefully put into emotion, which is what we are, because humans are not irrational, we're emotional, and then the mathematics. And I always say this, we can't let the mathematics drive the emotion. That's like getting the tail wagging the dog. You've got to get the emotional component correct and then backfill it with mathematics. If you do it the opposite way around, that's going to create emotional problems for the continuity and the succession through the generations. Well, that's what I found in my experience.
That was Derryn SShrosbree. He's CEO and founder of 33/7. Curious what your thoughts are, what you heard there, but in terms of step number one, in terms of continuity planning, what is the value of the farm? I think a lot of times we don't really want to talk about money. It's uncomfortable, but you can't really work on a farm succession plan and transition the farm unless you actually have a value you're working from. Very interesting, and would like your comments and thoughts on that topic.